Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new Elder Scrolls Online build video with me, Sherman. Today guys, we are taking a look at Meridia's Guardian, but before we do, I want to apologize. I got sick this week and I couldn't do anything about it really. And I'm feeling a lot better today, so I'm going to go ahead and get this video out for you guys. I do have another build coming out. It might come out later today or tomorrow morning. Not sure when, but that is going to be on the Shadow Guardian. That is a Nightblade tank build that I've been working on for a while, and it's pretty cool. I like it. So, let's get into it. This is Meridia's Guardian, a build that I made a long time ago, and a lot of people really liked it, and I've gone back and done some iteration to it, done some minor tweaking to it, and hopefully made it a little bit better than what it once was. Now, this build is made for dungeons, normal and veteran mainly, and it's to help integrate players into in-game content. It's not to help players play in-game. You can play in-game with it, but it's to help players get used to playing in dungeons and trials and stuff. Like, it's good for normal dungeons, veteran dungeons, hard mode dungeons, pretty much any dungeon it can play fine. When it comes to trials, it works really good in normal mode. In veteran mode, it works in most, not all of them, and in hard mode, most, mainly the first 4 trials that are, if you guys don't know what the first 4 trials are, that is Hellrot Citadel, Ethereum Archive, Sanctum Ophidium, and Maw of Lorcash. Those are the 4 intro trials, basically, that this build works really good in. It does work in Halls of Fabrication and Sanctum, the Sanctum Asylum, or Asylum, Sanctum, whatever it is, in Clockwork City. It's not really good in those 2. It's okay, and then in the new one it'll work fine as well in Somerset. So those trials are doable even on veteran and hard mode with this build, but it's going to be a little difficult if you're not accustomed to playing it on a regular basis. Like, you have to become comfortable with the build. You have to have an understanding of how it works for it to work really well in those. So, and I would advise that you be a more experienced player before you take those on. So let's go ahead and take a look at the stats, starting with the character screen. And as you can see, we put 2 into health. That's to get us just over that 32k mark. A Wood Elf is really hard to play as a tank, but it is still viable at 32k health. It works out really good. We have a 29k stamina with a 17k magicka. You don't have to set the attribute points like this, but if you can get the pools pretty close to this, it works out really well. If you're playing an Argonian, you will have more health, less stamina. If you're playing a Nord, you'll have more health, about the same amount of stamina. And if you're playing an Orc, you're going to have a little bit more health, a little bit on the same in stamina. And then if you play a Imperial, you're going to have a lot of health, a lot more health, about 36, 37k, 29k stamina with this. It's like I said, it still works out. Your stamina recovery will not be as high as this because the Wood Elves get a massive amount of stamina recovery. They get 21%, so that stacks with all the other recoveries you get. So you get a lot of stamina recovery with this build, and you get a decent amount of magic recovery, as you can see. You don't need a super high magic recovery for this build to work. You can also see we have a 1952 weapon damage. I set this build up to be both playable in dungeons and in open, like for playing in that content, but also be able to be played in overland content a little bit easier, so you can get through content a little quicker. We do have a 40% critical on the weapons side and a 28% spell critical. We're not really worried about the crit, but having that little bit higher crit really plays into the build kind of good. We do have a 24k spell resistance on the sword and board bar with a 21k physical. But when you swap, you go to 17k physical with a 20k spell, and that's because we are running bow on the back bar. But don't worry about that, because when you buff up with your thing here, that gives you resistances, you go to 25, 28, and then 32, 29. So you get a really good mix of resistances with this build. Going on down here, don't worry about the lycanthropy, you don't need it. This is just because right now on PTS, every character you make is a lycanthrope. So we do have major savagery because we are using the expert hunter, which gives us extra weapon critical. We do have the thief Mundus stone, and we are running tri-stat food. Now, there's a lot of different setups you can go with on the skills. If you don't want to use the skill setup this has, you can change it, it's fine. I like the skill setup it has because I like that extra little bit that it gives me. So moving on to the inventory. With tri-stat food, I would suggest the longfin and pasty and longfin pasty and melon sauce. This is a great food for tanks because it's a tri-stat food. It gives you max health, it gives you max magic, max stamina. It's all around just good. And then use any tri-stat pots. The best ones you can get are on the crafted tri-pots because they're going to give you a lot higher magicka, health, and stamina. They give you about 9k health, 7k magicka and stamina on return. So it's a really good return rate on that. They also give you the 20% magicka, stamina, and health recovery, which is also really good. Alright, moving on to the gear. So with the monster sets, a lot of people are gonna say, why aren't you using chains? I don't use chains with this build because I am running Swarm Mothers, which is like a free chains ability. Well, it's a cheap chains ability. Whenever you block an attack with this, anything with that is further than 5 meters from you that hits you will be pulled to you. And it doesn't matter how many opponents hit you, because if you just stand there and hold block, you can eventually pull everything to you that's at ranged. So it's a really good get the enemy to you monster set. It also gives you a little bit of stamina recovery, which also plays really well with this build. So we are running a light helm with a medium shoulder, and then on to the next set is what the build's all about, Meridia's Blessed armor set. That's why this is called Meridia's Guardian. As you can see, the 2-piece is physical resist, the 3-piece is stamina recovery, the 4-piece is spell resist, and then the 5-piece. When you block an attack, you have a 33% chance to blind the attacker, causing them to miss all their attacks for 5 seconds. This effect can occur once every 10 seconds, and it doesn't matter. Any enemy that hits you has a chance of getting this applied to them. Now, it will not apply to, like, say, if you're in Maw of Lorcage and you're fighting the 3 enemies at the beginning. There's a spellcaster, there's a sword and board knight guy, and then there's an archer. They cannot be blinded, but all the trash can be. So in trials, all trash can be blinded except for elite mobs and the bosses. So blind works out really well in dungeons. So that's why I run this set, is because it works really good in dungeon play. Trials, it works okay on trash, like especially like if you're doing Hellrust Citadel in that beginning part. There's not a lot of elite mobs throughout those dungeons. The ones that you do fight that are elite, some of them can still be blinded, like the ogres inside of Sanctum Ophidium. They can still be blinded, but like the trolls, I mean. But the actual elite trolls cannot be blinded. So regular trolls can be blinded, regular mobs can be blinded. So it's a really good set overall, like I said. Moving on to the next set we're running. We are running a 5-piece Plague Doctors. Now, if you're playing an Argonian, a Nord, or the Imperial, I would suggest running Ebon Armor. That works out really good for them. But in this case, Plague Doctors on a Wood Elf works out way better. So you can run Ebon or Plague Doctors with this. It's up to you. Now we are running a 3-piece jewelry set with a sword and shield and bow for the Plague Doctors, and then Blessed, Meridia's Blessed on the 5 body pieces, and then the monster set. Now the way we have the traits set up is we are running 5 sturdy pieces. The smaller pieces are sturdy along with the shield. And then the bigger pieces are infused with tri-stats. As you can see, these smaller pieces have stamina in them. You don't have to use stamina if you don't want to. You can use anything else. You know, and then on the jewelry, I do have 2 weapon damage here with a spell, infused spell magic recovery to give me that extra magic recovery that my character needs to get that 893 magic recovery that makes this build work out really, really well. So the reason I went with 2 weapon damage is to make this build a little bit more playable for overland content. because playing overland, tanks don't do a lot of damage, and this allows them a way of doing some damage while they're in overland, while you're just playing quests and stuff. So this plays out really well. Moving on to the shield, we are using Tri-Stat on it, and as you can see, it's a sturdy shield. And then on the monster set, like I said, it's light and medium. So medium's shoulders, this gives you greater resistances, and it doesn't give you as much, but as you can see between the two, they give you 3,000 extra resistances, so that works out better to have this light and this medium. On the body, again, infused, sturdy. And then on to the weapons. We are running 2 infused weapons. The main weapon has a Crusher enchant on it, and it is Plague Doctor, and then the bow is infused with a Weakening enchant. Now, I would suggest using one or the other, using Crusher on both or using Weakening on both. That's really up to the player. Crusher helps apply extra penetration against enemies, which allows them to die faster. The Weakening allows them not to do as much damage. So it's really up to you on how you want to run this, or you can run it just as is with the Weakening back bar and Crusher front bar. It's up to you. But that is the gear. Now we're going to move on to the skills. Skills, there is some floater skills here for different situations. So we're going to start on the front bar. But before I do, I want to let you know, or remind you to get all your class passives. That way you have them, just in case you wind up using skills from it. On the weapons, of course, get all your passives. Armor, light armor, get the top 3. Medium armor, get the top 2. And the bottom one. The bottom one isn't, this one isn't really essential to you as a tank. You don't need improved sneak, but you can use the athletics, which gives you increased movement speed and for sprint cost, and then the dodge rolling reduction. On to the heavy armor. Using all the heavy armor passives is really important. And then with the world skills, you don't really need any of them, but if you can, I would suggest getting these for the purpose of reviving every hour without a soul gem, and then this one for filling empty soul gems whenever you kill an enemy. So this way, if you have a lot of empty soul gems, you can fill them. Moving on to the guild skills. Fighter's Guild, you don't need, but it's good to have Flawless Dawnbreaker and Evil Hunter. These help you kill things faster, especially in Overland and in most normal dungeon cases and veteran dungeons. It works out really well. In Trials, it's not necessary, so you can swap some of this stuff out if you want. Also, if you're going to do this, which I forgot to do, which will also raise our weapon damage to 2,000, make sure you get all the Fighters Guild passives. You don't really need all of them, but it's good to have. Mages Guild, you only need Persuasive Will, because you're not using any of the skills here. So on to the Psijic Order. On the Psijic Order, I know it's going to sound strange, but if you're playing Overland, you really don't need Deep Thoughts. You can swap it out with Crushing Weapon, but make sure you get these passives, at least Clairvoyance, Concentrated Barrier, and Deliberation. Moving on to Undaunted, get the Undaunted passives. You don't need the Ranged Taunt, really, because you're going to be pulling enemies to you with your monster set. So when they come close, you can just taunt them with your sword and shield ability. If you do want the Ranged Taunt, you can throw it on the back bar. And if you're going to use the Ranged Taunt, do not use the Magicka one because it costs so much. Use the Stamina one with this build because it costs a little less. This saves you resources in the long run. Moving on to the Alliance, you don't need any of the passives. Racial passives, you want them all. And then with crafting, Alchemy, you want medicinal use. And with provisioning, you're going to want Gourmand and Connoisseur. This just helps your food last longer. And then the Alchemy makes your potions, your potion effects last longer. So it helps keep those the potion effects applied to you longer. So that way you can reuse them. Alright, so moving on to the skills. Starting with the main bar, we are using Pierce Armor. This does your major penetration abilities, your major breach, your major fracture. That does 5,280 on that, which reduces the enemy's physical and spell resistance by that much for 12 seconds. It does do a decent amount of damage as well. Moving on, and it's your main taunt. So moving on, we do have Heroic Slash here. This does minor maim against one target. I don't use this myself. I use Deep Slash, which is the other morph of this, and that's because I like to apply minor maim to multiple targets. And I'm really not concerned about 3 ultimate every 9 seconds. So it's nice, or it's actually a little bit more than that, but it's nice, but it's not that great, so it's okay. The next thing is Blazing Shield. Now, a lot of people say Blazing Shield's really bad for tanks to use, but it's a really nice way to build, to have enemies hit you, and you build the damage from the shield exploding. So the more damage you take, faster, and the faster your shield goes down, the faster it blasts out and does damage. It's a nice AoE against trash. When you're fighting a boss, it'll take a little bit longer, unless the boss hits you with a really powerful hit, which strips it instantly, which does happen. Next up, we have Deep Thoughts. Now, Deep Thoughts, like I said, we can float this out when you're playing an Overland with the Psijic Order ability Crushing Weapon, which I'll get into. But first, let's go over Deep Thoughts. Deep Thoughts is a really good way to restore resources. It also, when you activate it, because it is a channel ability, you get Deliberation and you get the Concentrated Barrier. Concentrated Barrier gives you a shield for 5,800, and then moving on to Deliberation, this gives you major protection for the time that you're channeling Deep Thoughts. So as long as this is going on, you're getting 30% damage reduction. And if you have your buff up from here, and then you have Deep Thoughts going, you actually get a lot more. This build has insane mitigation. It's crazy because of that. So it's a nice ability to have. The next ability we have on our bar is Evil Hunter. Now, Evil Hunter doesn't have to be used if you don't want to. The only reason why I use it is because I play a lot of Overland content. So doing that Overland content with a higher crit chance kills things faster. And then if I'm doing a lot of normal dungeon runs or even veteran dungeon runs, in a lot of the older dungeons, I like to have this because I like to help the group kill things faster. The more damage that's being done, the better. It doesn't matter if I'm light attacking or heavy attacking. As long as I'm doing damage, I'm doing good. I'm going to have a better chance of doing critical damage. The next ability we have on our bar is Flawless Dawnbreaker. Now, we only have Flawless Dawnbreaker here for one reason. The damage it does over time. Wow. Sorry about that. But it's for the damage it does and the damage it does over time. This is just a nice way if you're out in the open world and you're fighting, let's say, a mini boss, or you're playing through a quest and it has a boss in it, named encounter. This will help you kill it faster. Sorry about that. It's just a nice ability. It also gives you 5% weapon damage, which is also good. Moving on to the back bar. Back bar, we're going to have some floater stuff here, so I'm going to go ahead and go back to the bow. Now, you have an option here with the first skill. You don't have to use this. If you want, you can even use the ranged taunt from the Undaunted skill line here, but I like to use bow abilities. So having focused aim here is really nice. It applies minor fracture on the enemy, which increases their physical penetration against them, allowing you to do more damage. So in the open world, it's really good. In dungeons, it's really good. It also applies for your group, so your group gets that extra physical penetration, which is nice. Next up, we have Endless Hail. This is mainly here to keep our weakening applied, because as this is ticking damage for 10 seconds, it keeps weakening applied. So even if you swap bars, it doesn't keep it applied. But you get my point. It'll keep this applied while you're on the back bar. Next ability we have on our bar is Resolving Vigor. We have this here as a heal for us. A heal over time, that kind of thing, to keep our health up if we ever get low. It also is a nice group support ability that gives allies health. The next ability is our Restoring Focus. Now this is going to be essential to this build. Not only does it give you Major Ward and Major Resolve, which increases physical and spell resistance, it also grants you Minor Vitality, increasing healing received by 8%, and it gives you Minor Protection, which reduces damage incoming by 8%. This plays really well with the Templar because they get a lot more damage reduction than a lot of the other classes do. Now, on top of that, while standing in this circle, your physical and spell resistance is increased by 50%. So, and it's not really 50%, guys. It's not. If that was the case, it would be a lot more. But it's kind of close. It gives you a lot of extra resistances, which is nice. And then, of course, we have Evil Hunter back here as well, to increase our crit chance with our bow. And then we have Aggressive Warhorn. We have this here mainly for, because, well, not mainly, but because it's essential to most tanks to have this. This gives your group max magicka, max stamina, minor toughness, or max health by 10% for 30 seconds. It also grants major force, which increases critical damage by 15% for 9.5 seconds. This is really good for, like, if you're just playing in open world or in dungeons, really. In open world, you're not going to be using this as much as you are Dawnbreaker. In dungeons, you're going to be using it a lot more. And even if you activate this and you have a healer running this as well, when yours wears off, it'll give you a chance to drop a Dawnbreaker a little bit later and then let it recharge so you can use this. It doesn't take that long, so it's kind of a nice trade-off. That is the skills. We're going to move on to the CP here. So, starting with the red tree, 66 on Ironclad. This reduces damage taken from direct damage attacks by 22%. Nice way of mitigating that extra amount of direct damage that we take in dungeons and trials. We get a lot of this applied against us, so it's kind of nice. The next thing we have is 56 in a Hardy. This increases our physical, poison, and disease damage by 12%. That 8% we get of the minor protection while we're standing in our little circle, that applies to this as well. So that makes it actually a 20% physical, poison, and disease damage reduction. That stacks with that 66. You get my point here. It's a lot of mitigation through damage reduction. The next thing we have is Elemental Defender at 56 points. Again, lots of Flame Frost. This reduces Flame Frost, Shock, and Magic damage by 12%. We also get the 8%, so it's actually 20%. Most of the time we're going to have 20% unless we're out in the open world, and we're just going to have 12, which is fine. We have 23 into Thick Skin. This reduces damage over time effects by 10%. This does stack with Hardy and Elemental Defender. So if you have fire damage on you, that's flame damage, so that's 12, 10, 8, it's 30% damage mitigation from those. So you mitigate a lot more damage. Most of the time your Vigor will just nullify what damage you take from damage over time. Moving on, we have 40 into Bastion. This increases the effectiveness of our shield strength by 16%. You only need 40 in here. When the next update happens, when Murkmire happens, we might take this up to 50. We'll see how things go. We might adjust some of these point distributions then, but for now, 40 is really all you need. Next up, we have 19 into Quick Recovery. This increases our healing received by 5%. This is really good because with the way damage scales now with the enemies, having a good healing received with your heals, from your healer, from yourself, from your other group mates maybe, this helps stack those heals higher, which is really good. And it works for everybody. Tanks, healers, DPS. Having that 19 points in there is really kind of effective, especially on tanks. Moving on, we have 56 into Warlord, reducing our break free cost by 20%. 23 into Bashing Focus. This is to reduce our bash cost, because a lot of times a lot of people don't realize, but you do bash enemies, especially if you see them getting ready to do a special attack or something. You'll bash them to knock them out of it, which sets them off balance. So having that 14% reduced cost saves you stamina. Moving on over here. 43 into Mooncalf, increasing stamina recovery by 10%. When you add all the bonuses we get, we have like a 40-something, I think it's a 45% stam recovery. Because we have 21% from the Wood Elf, we have 10% from here, we have 10, or it's 35, it's somewhere around there. And then when you add the potion to it, it goes up to 55%. So you get a 55% stam recovery, which is really, really, really good. Next up, we have Arcanus 43. This increases magic recovery by 10%. Yeah, you need it. We also have 43 into Tenacity. This increases our stamina or magic return from our heavy attacks. We're using just stamina weapons, so anytime we do a heavy attack with our bow, with our sword, we're going to get stamina back. Don't use your bow. Sword's better for heavy attacks. Moving on, we have 40 into Shadow Ward. This reduces our block cost by 16%. Not as much as, not as little or as much as I would like. I like having 56 in here, but 40 is good with this build. I did use Wooler's calculator to figure out I think the total cost is like 682 or something in stamina to block. So it's not too bad. We have 11 into tumbling and 1 into befoul. We have befoul here because there is one dungeon where we will be using befoul, and that's and it's really important to make sure you have that befoul there, and that is for the oh my god, Dire Frost Keep is really where you want to use it. So having that extra 1% effectiveness to your healing reduction is really okay. But you want this 11 in here to reduce your dodging. So moving on, we have 43 into Bless. This increases our healing done by 10%. It's a nice way to boost our vigor heal, which is what we need. Moving on, 16 into Weapon Expert. 56 in a Master at Arms. This gives us 10% in our light and heavy attack damage. This gives us 20% in our direct damage. Light and heavy attacks are direct damage with this. We stick to our sword and board mostly, so getting as much damage out of it as possible is really good, especially in Overland. And then over here we have 43 in a Mighty, which increases physical disease and damage, physical damage or poison, physical poison disease damage by 10%. 56 into Precise Strikes. This increases our critical healing and critical damage done by 20%. We don't do a lot of damage in trials. In dungeons, you're going to do a lot more, so having that extra there, and then with the vigor, getting the extra critical healing is really good. I did put 40 into Thaumaturge, but after realizing it, you don't really need it, because there's only one ability you're going to really need this for, and that's Poison Injection and Dawnbreaker. If you don't want to put the points in here, I would suggest putting like 10 into here and then take some and put in Shattering Blows, because there is a few enemies you fight throughout the game that do apply damage shields to themselves, and what this does is it increases your damage done to enemies with a damage shield. It doesn't increase the damage you do to the damage shield, it allows you to do more damage through the damage shield. And that is pretty much it for this build, guys. CP, gear, stats, we went over it all, food, and yeah, it's an interesting build. I know a lot of people might find it to be a little non-meta, but that's okay. It doesn't. Not everything has to be meta. It does use some meta stuff, but it's mostly just a build that I really enjoy playing. It's one that I've played for a long time before I moved on to what I play now, which is the two-handed Avenger tank on my Templar. But I might actually go back to this now that I see how this works, and I've had time to experience some play testing with it. I didn't play test it when I built it this time, but I did play test it when Wolfhunter came out, and actually play tested it quite a bit, and it's a really good build, and it works really good in the new both of the new dungeons. So both the Wolfhunter dungeons. But that's it. I mean, that's Meridia's Guardian. So, hope you guys like it. And if you do like it, you can hit that like button. If you guys want to see more build videos by me, or some streams, or whatever things I might be doing, you can hit that subscribe button. Other than that, thanks for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day, and this guy might see you in game. Bye.